Yeah, hello everyone, and welcome to the first event in our special webinar and blog series on AI in food systems research. I'm Elliot Jones Garcia from the Natural Resources and Resilience Unit at IFPRI, the International Food Policy and Research Institute, and I'll be leading this initiative. I'm joined today by two colleagues who are co-curating this series with me, Jessica Light, who will be facilitating the discussion, and Marilia Magalhães, who will be monitoring the chat and collecting your questions. We're truly grateful for the strong interest in this series, and especially thankful to our two guest speakers for joining us today to explore how emerging insights from psychology can inform the development of generative AI skills for food systems research. First, we'll hear from Stephanie Oliveros, a cognitive researcher and co-founder of GenAI, an education platform advancing gender equity in AI. Stephanie works across healthcare and legal AI applications and advocates globally for women's leadership and ethical AI. Next, we'll welcome Diana Wolf, an industrial organizational psychologist focused on how emerging technologies shape user behavior, creativity, and team dynamics. Diana leads research at Avanade, mentors young technologists, and chairs Seattle's global AI community chapter, when not raising designer chickens on her mini farm. So the plan is that each speaker will present for 15 minutes, followed by a 30-minute discussion. Please feel free to post your questions in the chat at any time. We'll collect them and address them as many as we can during the Q&A. While our speakers don't necessarily work directly in food systems, their insights offer valuable perspectives on how generative AI is shaping research practice, perspectives we hope to connect back to our work during the discussion. Thanks again for being here. I'm really looking forward to the conversation. Over to you, Stephanie, please.
Hello, everyone. I'm going to I hope you can see it well.
Hold on, are we having a connection issue with Stephanie here? Oh, no, it's appearing now.
Yeah. Okay. I think I managed now. Lovely. Thank you. So, yeah, let's start with some practical tools and understanding of how can we use AI for research. Just a little bit of context. I think Elliot made a fantastic introduction, but basically AI is my day-to-day. I work with GenAI, I'm there of the platform with another women as well. And we decided to start this platform to educate, particularly women, on how to leverage artificial intelligence in multiple industries. So we collaborate with scientists and professors or academics in these like healthcare architecture across different industries, just to kind of like get more awareness into like really getting on a bit of understanding of what is overhyped and what is actually a little bit underhyped. And that is what we're going to discuss a bit today. So first, I'd like to mention how we are using generative AI, or like most are using it in 2025, according to Harvard Business Review. And I think this is quite interesting. If you see the graphics, the number one category that has reached the 31% is actually personal and professional support, so for mental health and companionship. And only 10%, and actually just diminished to 9%, was for research. So if we see that all the categories are like learning and education or technical assistance, and it's in the industry, particularly in corporate, AI is like surfing this big wave. But why is not so much within the research community with the potential that it has? It is a matter of trust, and it can be a matter of like multiple issues that we're gonna tackle in a minute. So the first question we need to ask ourselves is, if we well, if we need AI at all. And so particularly with Elliot, we've met in this conference almost a year ago when they presented this illustration that I thought was quite remarkable in the sense of what it means to question the use of AI. And many of current applications and usages are not really addressing the needs of the population. So one of the key things that we need to do first before starting using AI or implement it to anything, it starts thinking like who is the end user? What would be the purpose of implementing this, but also what could be some potential consequences in this? For instance, we have things like, is it gender sensitive? Is it addressing power dynamics correctly? Can it contemplate really cultural backgrounds, educational backgrounds? I think that regardless of the industry that you're in, this is very prominent in healthcare, but also within the food industry. We need to understand how these tools are impacting the end users and the community and all the supply chain, beginning from research, but also like if we're implementing AI tools that potentially has bias in it, what could be the consequences of that for the end user? So this is like one of the key things that I'm pretty sure that most of you have maybe thought through and could have generate that hesitation when using AI. The other big problem is to think, the question is like, well, is it correct to be using AI? Is it not about cheating? Or maybe, am I affecting my brain in somehow? So let's explore what are some current issues with AI and if it really is making us dumber or what it could be part of the dialogue, basically. So some of the current issues that we have, I mean, from it's a general point of view, but it's also from a psychological point of view, is the fact that we might be, or like one of the key arguments is that we might be playing a bit around shrinking our critical thinking. For instance, AI can be quite agreeable. And particularly large language models, when you're interacting with they tend to even have like these narcissistic traits that create a false consensus effect, which means that if I start to believe that what it says is true, like am I right? Because I'm like all the time perceiving that or I believe that the majority of people think the same way that I do. And because AI works with reinforced learning, then it starts with a feedback loop of biased information that could be quite dangerous particularly when we are researching. Then we have things like homogenization and the lack of ability of writing. Let's tackle these two things. Homogenization is something that I'll discuss in the next slide a bit more in depth, but because large language models tend to use the data of the user to retrain themselves as well, then we will find that academic writing or even creative writing can be very similar to one another. So where is the novelty? Where is the surprise? And lastly, also the ability itself. So it's like quite important for creating some sort of like system thinking into creativity, into developing that problem-solving skills, the ability just to write and have a white paper, be quite bored or stressed about that. So in a recent interview, the CEO of OpenAI, Sam Altman, was asked about how he used AI. And I thought was quite interesting the way that he answered. And he said, okay, I used ChatGPT for coding and document summarization. He didn't say about brainstorming or delegating his thoughts. Actually, he was a key advocate on the fact that just having a notebook and start the old-fashioned way to brainstorm ideas with it. So I think it is quite an interesting message if the leader of one of the most important AI companies in the world right now, it's telling you not to delegate your thinking to AI. So yeah, like I think it's definitely something that I think we all agree with, that should be. So in here we start entering the point towards human-computer collaboration, and that should be the way forward. It's not about not using AI, but knowing how to collaborate with it. So apart from that, like about like, well, the lack of creativity or individuality that can bring on the over reliance on AI, we have bigger social issues such as inequality. So not everybody would have access to these tools. Not everybody has access to automation. So what would happen with already well affected societies, let's say, or more neglected collectives of group of people who would be behind the technological innovation. And that doesn't mean, of course, that everybody should stop, but maybe we need to be very aware of how we implement this, not in a capitalistic way and like, okay, because of we are all in for innovation, we're going to put all our funding into developing these systems, but start working with the community, like like I was telling you before. So exploring, about a bit more AI and creativity. And so there is this study that I think is quite interesting to have a look, and it's about how generative AI can enhance individual creativity. So they have found, they selected 3 different groups. One of the groups were supposed to create an essay with no help. Actually was a more like a creative story, a fun story. Then the second group was using AI to create a story, and the third group was using a Socratic method, or using AI in more like a collaborative way for brainstorming a bit, but not to write the whole thing. They found that the third group who collaborated with AI, where the stories were more creative, more fun, better written, well structured. So overall, with a panel of human judges, they agreed that the third group was significantly better than the other groups. But on the other hand, they found that this third group, all the stories were quite similar, structured in similar ways, or with a similar plot or similar arch. So in here we see how how that novelty might be lost with time, and that could be quite impactful for the scientific community, for instance, because at the end we build with the work of each other's, and to creating something new. What happens if we start just reproducing kind of like bland research, and even worse, if the research is biased and we are even realizing that, or we realize it late after publishing. So those could be some of them, like the downsides. And on the other, also like furthermore with that, Stenberg in a recent publication last year explained about this principle of the use it or lose it. So it's basically, well, if you're not using certain cognitive function, then you might, just reduce it or lose it with the way that he explains. But on the other hand, we have interesting research that expands on the concept of using AI with a Socratic method. So instead of asking for questions directly when interacting with AI models, or not using it at all, we could start steps or to brainstorm ideas with us. I hope that you can hear me well, like losing the connection. Okay, so not brainstorms idea from zero, so not it generating the ideas for you, but rather like you posting your ideas and then it making you challenge you, making you see things in a different way. And that is part of the art of prompt engineering. It's kind of like that back and forth conversation with large language models that could be interesting. Also, this theory explains that, well, if we spend some time, if we spend less time or fewer time with mundane tasks. So like if we automate these other things that require a lot of our energy and a lot of our time, then we will have more energy and more time as well for a higher order thinking. So like we would have the cognitive resources to allocate into resolving more complex tasks. So that could be some of the like upsides of the usage. But you know, science is like it has multiple opinions. So we have this wonderful paper as well by Sharna Jamadar from Monash University in Australia, explaining that actually, if when we think, like let's say we think a lot and we use a lot of brain power, compared to just regular day to day, we're just using 5% more of our activity capacity, which I mean is not too much of a difference. It might feel tiring, but it's not that much. So it's like, is it really worth delegating our thought at all to AI whilst to save 5%? I mean, so yeah, these are some of the questions that we can start exploring. But if you decide to use AI, because at the end of the day, we need to do more studies, longitudinal studies, particularly neuroscience, to understand how it really impacts on our day-to-day life. AI is here. And it will stay, actually, it will evolve even more. We'll see in the couple of years, just like 2027 is the prediction that we'll see artificial general intelligence, which is artificial intelligence that surpasses human capacities. And it would be the most significant thing that could potentially have ever happened in the scientific community and the history of humanity, because it would give you the capacity to not only process an insane amount of data, but also find link points that could take years to find. So it is not about not using it, maybe exploring with it, integrating it, and yeah, like starting from level 0 to level up towards understanding what's coming. So these are some layers of learning. There are different frameworks. This is something that I recommend with GenAI, for example. So we'd start with the basics. Obviously, if you want to like truly learn about AI, you need to start with maths, like linear regression and coding Python. But if you just and algebra as well would be quite useful. But if you don't have time for that, I totally get it. I don't have time for that either. I already did it and I don't want to do it again. I would start with this. So the level 1 would be prompt engineering. So truly, how can you ask better questions? And you are scientists, therefore that part is checked. But how you frame it, how you interact with AI is quite important, particularly with large language models. Then the second layer would be, we call it Vive. Now it's known as Vive coding or Vive marketing or Vive whatever. And now everything is a Vive. And it's just natural language processing. So that means that you just, in plain English or in your native language, interact directly with AI tools. And then the AI just starts reinterpreting that or translated it into whatever is the command. Then the second layer of learning, I would say, is more about big data and data science. So we have things like RAG, retrieval augmented generation. So it's like you pull information. There are some cool tools, so Google that can do that now for free. You have obviously machine learning, where you can train for data sets, for example, and obviously like programming language like SQL to interpret that data. And the last layer and the big thing of this year is agentic AI, which is different of AI agents. So AI agents are the individual. So they have agency. It's artificial intelligence that go by itself. It's not commanded by you, but they have a specific task. For instance, that task could be find all research papers that link to a specific source or a specific citation, or they have this specific keyword. So the agent will go by itself, and it will tell you when it completed the task. And it would start again until you're satisfied with the result. Now, agentic AI is orchestration. It's about multiple agents working as a team towards a specific goal. And you can have multiple groups, the research group, in the case of the food industry, we're going to see some examples. You have like different layers in production, in sanitation, in distribution. Like you could have agents working at all sorts of levels, and that is quite complex to build, although there are some interesting tools that you can have a look at just to try and understand how they work. So we
Sorry to
don't have
interrupt,
time to
Steph, but
cover
can we wrap
everything
up?
today.
Sorry.
Sorry, yeah?
Can we wrap up? I'll give you one more minute, if that's okay, please.
Yeah, no problem. So just for prompt engineering, like top tips would be first to understand the model strengths and weaknesses. I recommend having a look at tables to understand which model are you using. Be specific, of course, provide examples. They provide context as well. You assign it a role, it will behave as the role that you give it, and break down these complex tasks into achievable milestones would be some of the key recommendations for a good prompt. This is quite very nice tools that I recommend for research. We have Perplexity that can do in-depth research, but also like sentiment analysis on social media and public. It's grabbing information from on the internet, and it tells you the source, consensus, search across papers. Anada is the video that you're looking at now, so you can have all the papers in one side, compare it in different tabs. You can ask questions and see specific common points to each other. And the most cool one is Future House, which is for free. And it has everything that I just mentioned, basically, in one. Right. So to conclude, yeah, in the food systems, we see these multiple applications. We have things like pesticide management and food analysis for water supply. It has like infinite applications that you can use, not only about just interacting with large language models, but applying directly to all different processes and systems. So it's definitely worth exploring these applications for in-depth. Maybe we'll have a different session to go one by one. And to conclude, the path forward with any application of AI is first thinking about this equity, so like including people, educating ourselves, obviously considering ethics and being quite strict about that, even if that makes us go a little bit slower, and advocating for good policy to be able to do that as well. Right. So just you have this QR code where you can scan and have a look if you have. I have free resources as well in GenAI for like learning more tools, and happy to have you. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thanks very much, Steph. If you're ready to start, Deanna, we'll move straight on. That was really good. Cheers.
Okay, can you see me and hear me?
Yeah, loud and clear.
Okay, perfect. So today, I'm so happy to follow Stephanie because she did such a wonderful job laying out the groundwork of where we're starting off in this conversation. So just to give you a refresher, Elliot did a good job introducing me, but I am Diana Wolf. I lead research for an organization called Avanade. That is a joint venture between Microsoft and Accenture. We are a global team in the office of the CTO, and we run research on AI models, how they're impacting work, how they're impacting organizations from like a micro to a macro level. So we look all across the spectrum on that. But what we're going to specifically talk about today is AI today. I'll do a quick review. Stephanie covered a lot of that. Then we'll get some tools in action, some pros and cons, practical demos. And then we'll do an iterative AI workflow and what that really looks like for literature review. Starting with today, I do research and I'm a mixed methods researcher. I'll be happy to sit down and talk to a group of people as much as I'm happy to send them a survey. And in my research, I found that AI is in fact a double-edged sword. It's going to go ahead and expand our impact, but it adds pressure to our users. While some of our users can feel empowered and innovative in a sense of psychological safety, maybe even feel more a higher level of safety sharing new ideas versus our non-AI users, we see that there's also pressure being put on our users. They're worried that because they're AI users, they feel that they have an increased level of responsibility in their area. That's 46% of our users to 38% of our non-users. And then also our AI users have a higher fear that AI may reduce the relevance of skills in their roles. And that touches on a topic that was brought up previously, which is the idea of what is the longitudinal effects of this technology that we've rapidly scaled and rapidly adopted at a pace that we've never seen before. We start to see that there's, as much as it can give us those cognitive benefits of reducing cognitive drain and reducing cognitive fatigue, it can also potentially erode some of our thinking skills if we automate too much. So like all things, too much of a good thing, everything in moderation, right? So AI should be used to amplify judgment, not to replace it. An over-reliance risks weakening the things that we're best at, and that can be our thoughtful decision-making. For example, I am an excellent writer, and I do most of my thinking through long-form writing. And AI could do writing for me exponentially faster than I do it. However, that is what I add as value. That is how I process, and that's actually the cornerstone of the majority of the research methodology that I have, is just my ability to write this out and think through it. Recently, I was put in a room with 300 of my peers and had very boldly said that we would be talking about AI and qualitative research analysis. And everyone sat in the room, and the second they sat down, I felt pressure, right? There was an elephant in the room. It looked like this. And this elephant has a name. The name of that elephant is the unspoken challenge of integrating AI into research without compromising scientific integrity. But her friends call her Barb. And while I was addressing this elephant in the room, many of them wanted me to give them permission to just take AI as plug in your data, accept the outcomes, and happily go run forward with it, right? Because that is the promise of artificial intelligence. That's the promise of automation. It's that full work stream automation. However, that's not where the tools are today. That is not where our scientific process and methodology has taken that step change to. Instead, I just presented an LLM as a potential alternative to a second reader in qualitative analysis of open field questions, which if you walked in that room expecting me to say, just plug all your data into ChatGPT, I can imagine your disappointment. However, we need to go further, slower. We need to slow down how we think about the implementation of automation in our workflows. And that's because of the current state of tools. When you look across the research process, you're going to see that at every phase, there are tools available for automation to you. When, where, why, and how we use those tools is essential. That is the new practice of science. And you are responsible for explaining the use of those tools, for being transparent in the use of those tools. That is your job as a researcher now. And don't worry, you don't need to screenshot this. At the end, there's an entire folder that I'll provide you with these resources. But just looking at how much there is available to us. And it goes beyond just ChatGPT or LLMs. It has already achieved a level of agentic AI. So really quickly, we are a Microsoft house. So I brought my friend, Microsoft Researcher Agent, which is released very recently as 2 weeks ago.
Thanks. Imagine you're tasked with creating a marketing plan for a new product launch. You start by letting researcher know what you're looking for, including the fact you want to consider what competitors are doing and your last product launch plan. Just like if you delegated this to someone on your team, it asks a few clarifying questions. You can give it a bit more direction, and off it goes. Built on an optimized OpenAI O3 reasoning model, researcher shows its chain of thought reasoning as it pulls from both the web and all your work data. like internal documents and files. Researcher even knows when and how to tap other agents so it can use their knowledge and logic to complete a task. And after a few minutes, you have your marketing plan, complete with citations so you can check its work. It's like having a highly paid, always available expert on hand.
An always available expert or expertise at your fingertips are a number of things that I've heard repeated when we talk about the automation of the role of research or of the researcher. And I always counter that with the idea of, if I gave you all of the knowledge in the world about chemical engineering, would you know what to do with it today? Notebook LM is another AI tool that I deeply enjoy using. On the left, you can see that you can upload up to 50 sources, and it will go through those sources and create, like, you can just do an outline or find common themes, or you can chat through that. But my personal favorite is that it will, in fact, create a 15-minute podcast AI generated for you to use. And for me, that's great when I need to hear research and like go through the process. And later on in the QR code, you'll be able to see that you can listen to the podcast about all of the sources that I built this presentation from. But all of that isn't without its peril. Because of the word delve. Delve is a word that personally I feel I was using frequently prior to 2022, 2023. However, the scientific community was not. What you see here in this red line is the spike of the word delve, specifically in medical research journals, in the titles and abstracts of those submissions. And is it because delve was the new hot word? Was delve the new slay? In fact, it is likely because AI models use the word delve with more frequency than human writers do. And this speaks very close to my own beliefs as a researcher, because writing is how I process. And if we automate those things, we lose our voice as researchers. We lose the very identity we've built over years of scientific discipline and practice. So you need to be mindful about the integration. It requires vigilance and critical oversight, and you need to be proactive to managing the risks that are present. Stephanie covered a number of the risks, but accuracy and reliability is going to be an issue. We are dealing with probabilistic systems that are just predicting the next thing. It has a lot of face validity. This is not a deterministic system. There's ethical and integrity risks. We need to think about the misuse of the generated content or finding, how we are protecting our data, how we are being intentional about maintaining our transparency about the usage of AI, and the human factors. So the over-reliance, the dependence on it, and the erosion of critical thinking skills, especially as we look to onboard what I would call our new AI native researchers. Anyone that's hiring someone today is likely hiring a researcher that has AI experience as they're early in their career. So all of this is to say, what does an AI workflow really look like for a researcher? Now, I'm not going to sit here because it would take 3-4 hours for me to tell you every step of the research process and where we could or should or maybe would use automation. But specifically in the example of the literature review, because measurements have come back that in the literature review process alone, AI is responsible for shrinking the window of time to conduct a literature review from 3 hours to 30 minutes. And if any of you remember the way back before ChatGPT, that was not, that was the most time-consuming part, second to data collection, of the research process. But what you will see here in the workflow is that there is never a point where there is just AI running free and wild, like potentially the Microsoft researcher agent. You should always check the outputs of AI. You need to use your judgment, your skepticism, and your discernment to maintain your scholarly voice. So the workflow is that you establish that inquiry. You are the originator of what this is going to be. You understand why this is important. You will then use your AI to explore whatever databases are available, summarize whatever content you need, but then you need to audit that. You need to filter for relevance. Is it pulling from Wikipedia? Is that a relevant source for you? No knocks on Wikipedia, it's very efficient, but is that what we want to build our base of knowledge from? Then you're going to ask it clarifying questions about papers. You're going to interact with your data. You're going to confirm some of that nuance or build it in. You're going to acknowledge the limitations. You maybe will feed it your own preferred resources. There's a number of tools that will walk you through how to do that. And then also use AI to cluster or visualize your papers. There's a number of tools that you're able to do that. You can see the bond of the relationship of these authors and these ideas. We can then co-develop outlines, background summaries, or any kind of literature tool that you're going to need to articulate your ideas, but you need to guide the tone, logic, and the coherence of those. And then finally, you'll go through the phases of generating and checking those citations, making sure they're organized, revisiting and iterating. So you need to surface additional sources. Ask it, how could I be off? Is there a source that's counter to my idea? And then also disclose the role of AI in your literature review. I'm not saying give AI a byline, but in the way that we disclose the statistical models we use or the methodologies we do in our analyses, I think that we should begin disclosing our AI tools with the same amount of transparency and also kind of the same amount of scientific positioning. We need to say, I used it specifically for this, and you have to be able to defend that, because the researcher's role with AI is that AI is great at doing mass processing of information. It can shrink your literature review time. It can look through your data for trends quicker. And in fact, even as early as 2017, if you look up Move 37, which is a human playing against a AlphaGo in the game of Chinese Go, it made a move that all of the experts in the field did not think was necessary or was in alignment with what they would have chosen. But it turns out that that move that the AI made was critical in its victory. So it's important to know that they can find new trends as well. There's plenty of benefits. But you are the gatekeeper, and you are the ethical compass, and you are also the interpreter. That is your role as a researcher and a scientist with AI tools. But above all, don't panic, all right? Right here's the QR code. You're going to be able to get the slides for this presentation. There's also a checklist in there, which as you're going through using AI, it can either promote the use of AI for you. You can say, should I automate this? Do I want to? But it can also ask you the questions to think through while using automation. Disclaimer, this is not a substitute for your organizational policies on AI automation or anything like that, but it is a guide to get you thinking about it. There's also an Excel file in there that lists out all of the resources that you can use that are AI tools specific to the research process, their pros and cons, and also the methodology for using LLMs as a second reader. And really quickly, I want all of you to ask yourself this one question. Do you believe that plant and animal cells exist? Because prior to the microscope, that was a theory. That question wouldn't have been out of place. That was a land of scientific conjecture. But the microscope was a tool that allowed us to see into the microscopic world, things we had only hypothesized about before, and revolutionized our scientific understanding. It made us better scientists, and it made us able to leverage this new tool as a way of creating discovery. That's all I have for you, and thank you so much.
Great. I want to thank both of our presenters. Elliot, did you want to come in?
No, just to hand over and say thank you.
Wonderful. So good morning, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jessica Light. I'm a senior research fellow at IFPRI, and I'm going to assist with some initial moderated discussion that will be followed by Q&A from the audience. So I see some questions being posted in the chat. I want to encourage, as our discussion continues, other audience members to post questions, and we'll be moving to those very shortly. But we'll start with some high-level questions for both our presenters. And again, many thanks for the fascinating presentations and for joining us today. So I will begin going back to Deanna. Could you share some thoughts about the most promising and the least promising daily applications of AI tools for researchers? So researchers at IFPRI are outside, they're sitting at our desks. What do you think are some of the first techniques we should try? And what are some that you think we should not consider in our workflow?
Yeah, so someone's implementation of what will be the most powerful AI tool to them is as nuanced as how someone goes about doing their workday, right? So it can be as simple as tell me about these articles that came up that I need synthesized, or even what did I miss in that meeting when I wasn't paying attention, right? These AI tools span the entire spectrum of work. But I think the most promising daily usage is whatever is saving you that cognitive energy. If you feel the tension of a bottleneck in your workflow, ask yourself, how can I automate this? If you're like, I don't want to write that email, have ChatGPT or whatever tools available to you do that. If you are saying, I'm having trouble with this report, it is so much easier to get past your blank page syndrome, even if what the AI is telling you is wrong, right? Because you're no longer staring at a blank screen. You're now like, oh, no, I need to correct that. So I think that the most promising daily use is whatever's moving you past your bottlenecks and your blockers. Pay attention to that in you, because a lot of how you're going to be efficient with AI is the self-auditing. And then the least promising, unfortunately, and very frustratingly, is my calendar. It's not scheduling for my calendar. That is my dream. If it could actually do the organization I need, and I joke about it, but if I could do a multi-platform organization of my day and take away some of the things so I can do the more creative and focused work, the reason I became a researcher, that's exponentially more valuable to me. So if we could get rid of administrivia, unfortunately, it's least promising right now.
Yes, well, mastering our Outlook calendars, I'm sure, is a tall mountain to climb, even for AI. Thank you so much. So now, Stephanie, over to you. It would be great to hear your perspective on the same question. So what do you see as some of the best opportunities and the least promising opportunities in terms of daily research workflows for incorporation of AI tools?
I think definitely I see the point on automating most of the processes. For instance, there is an interesting automation that I have in place. So every time there is a new paper published that is related to my topics of interest, I got this automation setting towards an alert to that, and it automatically creates a summarization and a link to my research. So I can see what are the contrasting points and be up to date as in a pace that I've never seen before. And that is where I see the potential of innovation as well. So I think that that's definitely something that for me has been game changing. I agree with Diana with the literature review. I was suffering with this on my last research. And then it's like, I use it. I need to use AI for this, and then I started with exploring different tools, and particularly I know that one of the problems, and I see in the questions there, is the reliability of the answers that we get out of large language models. So this is why I discovered tools like Perplexity or Consensus even better, that it tells you directly the source, the summarization of the paper, like the snapshots, the quality of the paper as well. Like it gives you all the information straight away. It's just fantastic. So that could be like my top points. And I think like the downside could be at the moment, I don't think it's quite yet in data analysis. I mean, it does process, but I not even myself feel that I can trust when it does statistics, for example, or when it goes with certain calculations. I guess like it depends. You have to have a model that's very well trained towards doing that to be able to delegate and trust that. But yeah, at a certain point, I don't think we are in a moment yet where we can just let go AI run wild, and we need a bit of supervision. So yeah, I'll treat AI more as my personal assistant rather than a colleague at this point.
Great. So the next question I have for you both is about managing some of the pitfalls and risks associated with AI. And I think you both highlighted some of those risks. And I'll maybe amplify one of the comments I've seen a participant raise, which is use of confidential data and research, whether that's highly confidential, such as personally identifiable information that we may have collected, or even information that perhaps doesn't raise ethical questions, but we simply don't want to share with the world yet, like our early research findings or preliminary drafts. So perhaps that's one risk you can touch on, but feel free to also discuss other pitfalls of AI use that you see as important. So maybe we can start with Stephanie first.
Yeah, so when I was telling in my presentation that we need to acknowledge weaknesses and strengths of different large language models, some of these are a data policy protection well, as well. For instance, I know that it's well known that OpenAI are not the top security ones in terms of data protection. You have more ethical models like Mistral, the European one, or Claude, which is doing quite well in terms of research, by the way. But some people argue that the way forward is open source models, because you can run them locally, and then you don't have to like share information, and potentially this could be one of the solutions that I see. And also for more accessibility towards certain populations. There is an example of a community in Zanzibar where there is not access to internet, but they have access to specific chatbots for maternal care through locally run AI models. So then we see that it has a potential to really give information to people. But on the other hand, it's like, how can you control the way that people use this? For us researchers, okay, fine. But if we popularize this to everyone, then we are giving knowledge and power equally to all populations. So that is kind of like the paradox.
Great, thanks. I know over to you, Deanna. And I know, again, you spoke some about risks, but can you maybe highlight also some other specific risks that you see and researchers might face, or pitfalls in their daily use of AI?
Yes, I think the first and quickest pitfall to fall into is just going too far too fast with automation. You need to be modularize your workflow. Think about it in chunks of tasks to be done, and then find the place for that, because you can control, it's an experiment in itself every time, right? You can control that. The other thing that I'm really concerned about is bias amplification. Anytime we create data, we open ourselves to bias. But what does it mean when we run it through a probabilistic system? Some of our AIs right now are being trained on our own preferences, even if you don't notice it in the background. So like ChatGPT's model is trained on it has a memory set that is to you as user. So it could amplify your bias. And I'm not sure what else could be learned through a conversation where maybe the results feel really good and valid to you as a researcher, but that's because it knows what you want to hear, right? It's predicting what you want to hear. So be very cautious of the amplification of bias. And in fact, that goes to when Stephanie was talking about the narcissism of AI and the potential of that. When we saw the rise of social media, it became an attention economy. We saw that we commodified attention. I didn't at first, but now I do strongly feel as a psychologist that emotions will become the economy of AI. And that is because an AI isn't going to necessarily disagree with you. It isn't going to delay a response that it needs to give you. So be careful of how you are interacting with it and how it shapes your expectations of others around you as well.
Great, thanks. I see a number of audience questions. Should I go ahead and read one or two audience questions, or Maria, would you prefer to do that?
You can go ahead.
Okay. So a question from Elliot that relates to the point just raised about AI potentially amplifying bias. So when you're working with AI, both of you emphasize the importance of maintaining your own voice and positioning. Could you share some thoughts on whether you feel that voice is effectively preserved in your interactions, and if so, how? I didn't pose that to a particular person. Maybe back to you, Stephanie, for some short thoughts.
I didn't quite understand the question. Can you repeat that, please?
Sure. The question was how, if you feel that your own voice and positioning is maintained in your interaction or use of AI tools, and if so, how?
Hmm. I think, I mean, it is very challenging because as you interact with AI, it can definitely like take you towards the conversation, like guide you, and you can lose your power if you're not being careful. So I think it's quite important. Well, at least what I do is to have like specific projects. So I use more Claude than ChatGPT. And in Claude, as you have custom GPTs, in Claude, I have projects that are trained specifically to speak to me in a specific way as well. So with the Socratic method, for instance. So it's like you never reveal the question. You make me like question everything that what I'm saying. Like we are going to just brainstorm and so forth. And in that way, I try to like to keep the natural conversation as if I were having with a colleague. The good thing about this is like I have access to this at any moment I want. The downside of it is like at the end, like over relying on that on this without really knowing how these models are trained with the data that they're trained. Is it really giving me a fair world of view? So yeah, I think like practicing critical thinking always is a good overall tip, I'll say.
I agree with all of that, and I want to build from it in times where I feel that AI has helped me build my voice or empower my voice. As a woman in STEM, and I function in a lot of different areas, I have to bridge between academia and industry. Sometimes I need a translation point for what I'm trying to say, right? So if I need to communicate to an executive at an organization, I have designed a model called Corpo Diana, who can explain in an executive voice what I'm trying to say. Is her output exactly what I need all the time? No, but does it push me closer and make me go, oh yeah, I should really simplify there or clarify there? It helps me move the marker toward presenting to my stakeholders. It is that old adage of complexity in the science, simplicity in the solution. It can help me get there faster because as a researcher, I'm often in the weeds. And there's nothing more disheartening than when I'm trying to explain the model I'm very excited about, and I just see, oh no, this was not the audience for that. So it can help me to identify my messaging for audience, and has actually helped me build my voice across different areas with more clarity. So I have been empowered in my role as well.
Great. Thanks so much for those responses. We are quickly running to the end of our time. I want to briefly pose one more question and also note that questions we were not able to address, we hope to follow up with some responses from the presenters, probably on our LinkedIn page. So the last question, just for a couple of minutes, and then over to Elliot, was about the environmental implications of using generative AI, given significant water consumption and risks of water scarcity and inequities in the processes used to train these models. That's really two halves of a question, so feel free to introduce either. So maybe Stephanie, I'll pass that to you just for a brief response.
Sure. This is the problem. This is the biggest challenges of all. Although it is also paradoxical because it can at the same time provide a solution. So, I mean, yeah, it is a challenge. Maybe it's about how we use it. And I see that maybe prioritization of certain industries, healthcare research, for instance, absolutely. But like, do we really need to create another image in Ghibli style? So that's the thing. So maybe like public awareness. providing certain limitations from these private companies. So it's not about profit and in usage, but like it's a specific usage, and it's not all obviously part is conscious of individual responsibility, but also this is part of the policy making that I was mentioning before. Like we need regulations to say like when is the limit, and also public funding towards research to develop alternative energy consumptions and more efficient models as well.
Yes, it's not just about the individual user and their image generation proclivities. It is actually also about regulation. We are in a very jagged frontier of regulation. It depends on your locality. It depends on whatever is going on market-wise as well and where you're at. So I would say that the Green Software Foundation has actually been pretty good at leading in this space and talking through, even preceding the generative AI, how we can think about how to make our tech and our deployment, usage, training, and building of tech more sustainable. So they've got a lot of great resources as well if you want to tap into them.
Great. Thank you so much for those responses. And thank you again.
Sorry,
to the
Jessica. I want to say one last thing, if that's okay, because just to inspire some innovation and people here, one way forward could be small language models instead of large language models. So like highly specialized models that can be trained for specific tasks and are way much more efficient. And it could be maybe one of you, the researchers of institutions that could start working on these solutions.
Great, thanks. Over to you, Elliot.
Sorry. Hi. Thanks so much. That was wonderful. I really appreciate that. Fantastic talks from both of our speakers, and what a great participation we've had. A big thank you to everybody. I would like to remind you, you can find more information about our speakers as well as the series as a whole on our event page. But just to wrap up, I wanted to conclude with some of the things we're trying to do with this series. So first, we're trying to create a space for open, interdisciplinary conversation about what AI means for ethical and responsible research in food systems. Second, to build practical skills and shared language so we can engage with these tools critically, ethically, and effectively in our work. And third, to showcase and explore emerging tools and use cases that support real-world impact across the food system landscape. So if you're working on something relevant or know someone who is, we'd love to hear from you. Please feel free to reach out. Is that showing you? Our next session on organizational journeys in human-centered AI takes place on July 10th, 11 a.m. Eastern Time. We'll be hearing from practitioners at Digital Green and the Agency Fund, reflecting on how development organizations are onboarding AI, what's working, where tensions arise, and how participatory approaches are being adapted in practice. The discussion will be led by Jiawoo Koo, our CGIAR Director for Digital and Data Science. The registration link again is in the chat. Please sign up and spread the word. Looking forward, we have more sessions in the pipeline, exploring how AI can support both quantitative and qualitative research, inform food policy design and implementation, and do so while staying grounded in ethical and responsible principles, particularly around gender, equity, and inclusion. Beyond webinars and blogs, we're also excited to experiment with new formats like informal brown bags, hands-on workshops, and curated focus groups to make space for deeper discussion and practical learning. So finally, we'd really appreciate if you would take a moment to join our LinkedIn group and fill out our short survey. Both are linked in the chat and in the event description. It's a way for the conversation to keep going and to help shape the direction of this series moving forward. And also that we plan to answer some of your remaining questions there in the not too distant future. So thanks again for spending time with us today. We look forward to seeing you at the next session. Thanks.